How would you answer the question, what are the elements of the faith that are non-essential? Here's the answer we'll explore. There are important elements that we pursue for our ongoing faithfulness to God. There are also personal elements that don't come with clear direction from God. We have freedom within these personal elements, but we need to use wisdom. Let's break that down just a little bit. There are important elements. In an earlier conversation, we talked about how the Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the Corinthian church. The Christians in Corinth, they were saved from their sins, but they were not following Jesus as well as they should. They knew the essentials of the faith, but throughout the letter to this church, Paul pointed out several areas where they could improve. For example, people in the church, they were jealous of each other, they were fighting with one another, and they're starting to become out of control. For the most part, Paul was reminding them of the important elements of their faith. There are important elements that we pursue for our ongoing faithfulness to God. While the important faith elements don't save us, they do help us in our faith journeys. They're important for helping us grow and mature as Christians, and they help us to remain faithful to God. The important faith elements also help us to serve God better. For example, if somebody claims to be a Christian, but they aren't kind to others, it can hurt their relationship, not just with others, but also with God, because unkindness hardens hearts, and their hearts will begin to build a wall between them, the community around them, and most importantly, their Creator. There are important elements that we pursue for our ongoing faithfulness to God. There are also personal elements. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the church in Rome, you know as the book of Romans, and one of the reasons he wrote to them was to explain that some things are not worth arguing over. He explained that we need to be gentle with each other, not argumentative, and that we need to stay away from arguments about things that do not matter. In other words, we don't need to argue about things that qualify as personal elements. Topics, subjects, or issues that people have personal opinions about, but aren't considered essential or even all that important. Here's what Paul said in Romans 14:1. Accept the one whose faith is weak without quarreling over disputable matters. Another way to say this is not to quarrel over opinions. There are important elements that we pursue for ongoing faithfulness to God. There are also personal elements that do not come with clear direction from God. The 66 books of the Bible were written a very long time ago. In fact, the last book of the Bible was written almost 2,000 years ago. So there's a lot of things in our world today that just aren't talked about specifically in the Bible. For example, does the Bible tell us which movies to watch? No, because movies didn't exist back then. They weren't invented when the Bible was written. When it comes to choosing what movies to watch, it's important to use wisdom that we learn from the Bible. But at the same time, we have the freedom to make what we think is a wise decision. In other words, you have the freedom to choose if a movie is beneficial to you or not. But you have to use biblical wisdom in order to make the correct choice. There are important elements that we pursue for ongoing faithfulness to God, and there are personal elements that don't come with clear direction from God. We have freedom within these personal elements, but need to use wisdom. We talked earlier about how we have the freedom to make what we think is a wise decision when it comes to these type of personal elements, movies, politics, these kinds of personal ideas. It's important for our relationship with God, ourselves, and others that we truly try to use wisdom in these areas. And it's not always wise to do something just because we may have the freedom to do it. As Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10:23, many things are permissible, but not all things are lawful or are beneficial. To summarize our video, this week I'd like to share with you one of my favorite quotes that has been passed down through church history. In essentials, unity. In everything else, liberty. And in all things, love. So to recap, how would you answer the question, what are the elements of our faith that are non-essential? Our answer, there are important elements that we pursue for our ongoing faithfulness to God. There are also personal elements that don't come with clear direction from God. We have freedom within these personal elements, but we have to use biblical wisdom. Now, continue through the continuing conversation packets and join with us this week as we focus on using the wisdom God has given us.